Next week is Holy Week. We'll have a regular Palm Sunday service next week, and then the Passover Seder is on Wednesday at 6. I'd like you all to come if you can. It's a very educational meeting. I heard through the grapevine that some thought that it was going to be a full meal. It is not going to be a full meal. It's going to be a small plate with some lamb and the different foods for Passover. And the Passover is actually the point where Judaism and Christianity come together. And the church has just taken one little piece of the Passover and turned it into communion. But we really need to understand the whole meal. And the Apostle Paul said, as often as you eat the feast. And so he was assuming that the church would continue with the Jewish Passover. And he said you should come, with a whole heart and without bitterness and so forth. So I would encourage you to come. If you want to help with some things, let Daisy know. So it'll be at 6 o'clock on Wednesday the 16th. And then, of course, Easter is the following Sunday after that, and we will be having communion on Easter, which we normally don't do, but it happens to fall on that week this year, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Are there any questions about the Passover Seder? Okay, let's get back to our story. This is part 2 of a story in the book of 1 Samuel. And let me just set the background up. King David is not yet king. He has married Saul's daughter. He's run into problems with his father-in-law. His father-in-law has chased him out. He has a number of people who are following him in the wilderness. He's basically has a militia, and he's hiding out from King Saul. And there are people in the area who are raising sheep, and he has a good relationship with those people, and he's protecting them and making sure that raiders aren't coming in and stealing the sheep, and he's protecting them from any problem that they might have. And it comes to the point where the sheep are being sheared, and there's a big party going on among the people who work for this guy. And so David sends a couple of his emissaries to the man and says, I've been around, I've been protecting your people all this time. You're having a big party. Basically, can I come? And he is a surly, nasty guy. And he answers in a very go ahead there, please, Aretha. He answers in a very nasty way. And he says, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are breaking away from their masters." So this shows us that this man, he says, who is he? But he knows who he is. He knows that he is running from his master, King Saul. And he doesn't want to give anything that belongs to him to David. And he says, "Shall I take my bread and my water and the meat that I butchered for my shearers and give it to men who come from where I don't know where?" It's all about me when it comes to this fellow. It's all about me. I'm not giving him anything. Even though, there was a good relationship between his servants and David and his servants. His wife's name, next slide, was Abigail. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance. Why does the nasty guy tend to end up with the pretty girl? Have you ever seen that in life? How did she end up with that guy? There's that Seinfeld episode. Do you ever watch Seinfeld? Where George pretends to be the bad guy to get the girl, and he puts the leather jacket on, and she thinks that he's some sort of a hood. And then she finds out he's an ordinary dope, and she doesn't want anything to do with him anymore because he's not the bad guy. In those days, women didn't necessarily get to choose who they were married to. And obviously, if things worked out culturally, we would say that her father probably, it doesn't say this, but probably her father married her to this fellow because he was rich. But he's a nasty, well, I won't say that word. He's not a good guy. But she's there. Now we're looking at wisdom in these passages, in these weeks. And last week we talked about the wisdom that Nabal had. He was wise when it came to making money. He was wise when it came to hiring people and saving up and producing a flock that grew. So he was really good financially, but he was not good as a person when it came to interpersonal relationships at all. On the other hand, his wife is intelligent and beautiful. He's intelligent as well, too. Do you think that this woman is going to be happy with a guy like that? I mean, over the years, I've had a lot of women come and say, I don't know what to do, my husband this, my husband that. They find themselves in a situation where not a good situation, and she probably was in a situation like this. If he's nasty to his workers, and if he's nasty to people in the community that are helping him, he's probably nasty to his wife as well. Would you think so? Have to take the top off. So David's young men turned away, came back and told him all this. And David said, every man strap on his sword. Well, AI thinks that they had spears. I just asked it to give me a picture of David with his army, and they have spears, not swords, but I didn't have time to change it. So get ready for war. Now, does this sound like the Christian response? Let's go kill them. David, in the end, he came around and, he got with God and he wrote the Psalms. And, in the end, he turned out okay. But throughout his life, he was a little rough around the edges. And so he says, get your swords. Obviously, everybody had a sword. They probably had to register them with King Saul. And he said, let's go, we're going to kill these people. And there are 400 men with him and 200 that remain with the baggage. 400 fighting men and 200 supporting people who take care of the property. 600 men. Let's go kill this guy. Is that very wise? Is that according to the Christian gospel in any way? It's not. It says, a man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it's his glory to overlook a transgression. You don't have to respond to every time somebody does something to you. It's to your glory to be able to overlook it. Now, how many times throughout life, the older you are, the probably more times throughout life, you have had somebody do you wrong? Have you had it happen? How were you on overlooking it? I was angry at somebody for decades. I knew I had to get over it, but I was. It says in Leviticus, back in Moses' day, you shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Did you know that those two things were hooked together? We always have you shall love your neighbor as yourself as something that Jesus taught, but on the other side of it is a grudge and vengeance are not in the purview of the individual Christian. It's not our responsibility to take vengeance for anything, even though things have been done wrong. Even though we're angry with this guy because he's the richest guy in the neighborhood and he won't give us a piece of meat to eat, even though we've protected him and we haven't asked him for anything up to this point. So it's a good thing to look over, it's a wise thing to look over when somebody does something against us. Meanwhile, here's the real hero of the story. One of the young men, we don't know what the young man's name was, but he's the real hero of the story. He told Abigail, the beautiful girl, Nabal's wife, David sent messengers out to the wilderness to salute our master, and he shouted insults at them. Now, I don't know how much Nabal would listen to Abigail. I suspect not too much, because what she does next would indicate that maybe she's acting on her own. She's using her knowledge and her brains and her wisdom to act on her own. She doesn't go and confront her husband. Maybe she would be afraid to confront her husband. But this person knows that something has to be done, because these people who had come from David, you know, they were highly offended. They went back and they stirred up David and they stirred up the people who were with David. You know, there's never one person who has an issue. Even in the church, one person will come and say, well, there's a lot of people that say, da, 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 da. You know what I'm talking about? They got to stir up somebody. And so these people are going back and they're stirring David up and they're stirring the other people up. And this one smart person says, hey, I got to stop this war before it starts, or it's going to be a real problem, because we are not in any place right now to fight a war, because they are in the middle of a big party and they're having all kinds of meat and they're having all kinds of wine, and many of them are half drunk. And so Abigail is obviously not involved with that. And so somebody goes and says, you need to do something. Your husband is an idiot, and he has insulted David and his men. The men were good to us. Next slide. We suffered no harm. We never missed anything. That sounds like good Christian people, right? Good Jewish people. Anything when we were in the fields, as long as we were with them, we were a wall. They were a wall to us day and night. And all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. These are good folks. They shouldn't have been treated like that. James says this: the wisdom from above is pure, peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed of whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Peace is always to be preferred to war. Peace is always to be preferred in interpersonal relationships than problems. And so the wise way to do things is to make peace. Rebecca understood that. Next slide, please. Know this and consider what you should do. Evil has been decided against our master and against all his house. He is so ill-natured that no one can speak to him. You know, that's a dangerous place to be. If nobody can correct us, if nobody can say anything to us that will make any difference, we're headed for a downfall. There was somebody which really irritated me this week. Now, I don't like to involve myself in discussions on Facebook about politics. And I generally turn, if anybody on the right or on the left is being nasty, I'll just make it so that I don't see their page. But I was on somebody else's page, and I was reading down through the list, and there's a person who is a Facebook friend of mine, if you can call him that, and he said something I felt was terrible. He said, basically, I'm not going to tell you exactly what he said, but he said, anybody that he knows from school that supports a certain president of the United States is stupid. They were bad in school. And then he said, I understand why Eva Braun stayed with Hitler, his girlfriend, which irritated me. And so I said, I don't do this often, but I said, your arrogance is astounding. And he wrote something nasty back. He could not be corrected. I felt he needed to be corrected on this, because not everybody that's in the other political party, no matter which political party we're talking about, is stupid. And we shouldn't be calling people stupid in the other political party, whatever yours is. I know there's people on both sides of the aisle in the church here. I understand that. I don't understand why you are, but I got to be nice to you. He's so ill-natured, no one can speak to him. If we get to that place where nobody can say anything to us, and we are unwilling to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't have said that on Facebook. But Nabal, nobody can talk to him. So there's no sense talking to him. Here's two of my favorite Proverbs. Notice that the first one is verse 4, and the second one is verse 5. And they say exactly the opposite. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will be like him. Answer a fool as his folly deserves, that he not be wise in his own eyes. I love this. People say there's no contradictions in the Bible. Well, here's one. And it has to do with if you correct a fool, they're not going to like you. And if you don't correct a fool, they're going to be wise in their own eyes. Both are true. And we find ourselves in the middle of things. And if we're dealing with somebody like Nabal who can't be corrected in any way, we're going to be like him. And if we answer him, it says in one translation, lest he hate you. So this guy says to the woman, know this and consider what you should do. Evil has been decided. He is so ill-willed, nobody can talk to him. Next slide. When Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep, ready dressed, she had to get them from the party. They're already slaughtered. They're all ready to be butchered. 5 measures of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs. And she loaded them on donkeys. And I thought, how much would it take, how much food would be sufficient for 600 people? And when you think about it, this wasn't a huge amount of food for a group like that. And so she put it together and she sent it on ahead towards David. And she did not tell her husband. I mean, if you got a husband like that, there are some things you just can't tell him. Nobody can tell him anything. He's having a big party, and it says in one place, he was living like a king at this party. He was at the top of the world, and David is a poor guy who's running away and trying to save his life. And he's actually the king, but not yet. And this guy's living like a king. So she sends this food ahead. It's not a bribe. It's something that should have been done. Nabal should have sent this food himself, or he should have said to the people, come on up and join the party. Now, they always say if you have a party, be sure to invite the neighbor, because if you're making a lot of noise, if the neighbor's there, they don't care. And we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, and we're not supposed to bear a grudge against our neighbor. But here David is doing exactly that. So she rode the donkey and came down under the cover of the mountain, and David and his men came down towards her, and she met them. Now, who would you rather meet? Nabal or Abigail? You have to have the right emissary. Okay, we've got a problem with Russia. Okay, who should we send? We have an issue with this. Different people have to be sent out to different places, people who are in the right place who can make a difference. And here this beautiful, smart woman comes to ask David not to do it. Is she more likely to have success, or is the nasty old guy more likely to have success? I mean, beauty is deceitful and vain, it says in Proverbs, and yet beauty can be used for good with a person who has the right kind of heart. Look at what David says here in verse 22. God, do so to David and more also, if by morning I leave so much as one male of all who belong to him. May God do to me what I'm planning to do to him if I don't do it by tomorrow. Should we be bringing curses upon ourselves? But this kind of behavior will definitely bring a curse upon ourselves. And David is not afraid. This is what he's determined to do. There's just no way he's going to pass this off because he's been disrespected. So he curses himself. Now, when Abigail saw David, she hurried and alighted from the donkey and fell down before David on her face, bowing to the ground. My Lord, do not take seriously this ill-natured fellow, Nabal. Now, I haven't mentioned this, but the name Nabal is the ordinary word in Hebrew for fool. I don't know if his parents named him Nabal, or I suspect maybe his parents didn't, but when he grew up, the people who were around him called him fool behind his back. She calls him fool. Why is he a fool? He's not a fool when it comes to making money, but he's certainly a fool in interpersonal relationships and dealing with the community that is around him. So she says, don't take seriously this ill-natured fellow, for his name is, and so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord, whom you sent. I wasn't there. I didn't know about it. I heard about it. And so your request that you asked for, here it is. My husband doesn't know anything about it, but here it is. You deserve it because you've been good to our people, and please forgive this offense. It's wise to make peace, no matter the issue and who's involved. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, since the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from taking vengeance with your own hand. Now, she's assuming something here. He hasn't come to this place yet, but she says, I know that you're a good guy and you don't want to take vengeance because the scripture says that you can't take vengeance, and I'm here as an emissary from God to keep you from entering into a foolish thing yourself. I think this is really smart way to approach it. She appeals to the better nature of David. I mean, David had a bad nature and he had a good nature, and she appeals to the good nature. She says, I know you want to be right with God, and so therefore I'm here to help you along with that. You see, the difference between Nabal and David is that somebody could come to him and point out where he's going wrong. And so we should, as we're thinking about wisdom, we should look at this story as an example of our own lives. The Lord has restrained you from blood guilt and from taking vengeance. Now let your enemies and those who seek to do evil be like Nabal. Wow, that's not a very nice thing to say about her husband. But you know what? There is something about reciprocity in life. Jesus did teach it. He said, what you sow is what you reap. And she's basically saying he has sown this bad stuff, and the bad stuff is going to come back. You know, if we bear a grudge, it's bad stuff. If we bear a grudge, it's a seed which will grow into bitterness. Next slide. Now, let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass. You know, there's a difference in the scriptures between a trespass and a sin. A sin is something, according to the law of Moses, a sin is something that you do wrong and you don't intend to do it, but you're careless, or you don't understand the consequences of what you've done. But a trespass is when you do something intentionally. That's why Jesus said, when you bring your trespass offering, before you do that, go be reconciled to your brother. Then bring the trespass offering. In other words, you have to make it right. If you intentionally do something to somebody, you have to make it right. And she says, let this present be given to you to forgive the trespass of your servant. What did Jesus do? He gave himself as the present so that our trespasses and sins might be forgiven. Then she says this, the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you as long as you live. So not only does she recognize that God is working with David, but she also recognizes that he's going to be the next king. She somehow, in her wisdom, in her understanding, maybe in her prayer life, maybe she heard this from God when she was praying. Scriptures don't say, but somehow she knew it. I think it's a pretty good bet that God revealed this to her in her prayer life, and that he's not to be guilty for the rest of his life. David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me today. So here he understands that God arranged this meeting for his benefit. And this is just like all the Jewish blessings. That when you come to Passover next Wednesday, their prayers are not like our prayers. We say, thank you, God, for this food, and thank you for the hands that prepared it. The Jewish prayer is, thank you, God, for making this apple, for making this piece of meat. We thank you and bless you because you've done this. So in a Jewish prayer, God is blessed. In a Gentile prayer, generally speaking, the food is blessed. But this is a good example. And David says, blessed be the Lord. Blessed be your good sons. You know, being an old guy such as I am, I know that being in the National Honor Society in school does not necessarily make for a successful life. A person on Facebook the other day said, well, anybody that supports the president is, they flunked out of school. Without exception. He said, without exception. That's not common sense. It's not wisdom to say things like that. Blessed be your good sense. You can be in the National Honor Society and have a failed life. You can be the worst student in the class and have a successful life. And it depends on what your relationship is with God. You have kept me today from the blood guilt and from avenging myself by my own hand. Thank God she showed up and did the right thing and made peace. Some might say, well, it was a bribe. It isn't a bribe because it's what should have been given in the first place. Next slide. As surely as the Lord God of Israel lives, which is pretty surely, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come down to me truly by morning, there would not have been left one to Nabal, as much as one male. And David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, go up to your house in peace. I've heeded your voice. I've granted your petition. She's a very wise, smart, beautiful young woman who prevented a war, and the unnamed person behind it, we don't know what their name was, but he was just as much responsible for the peace that came as Abigail was. Next slide. Then Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house like the feast of the king. He's taking upon himself to live like a king and refusing to help the real king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. The Bible does not forbid drinking wine, but it certainly warns against indulgence in wine. It's not for kings to drink wine, it says in Proverbs somewhere. It might be in Ecclesiastes. Jesus drank wine, but not to drunkenness. Noah drank wine to drunkenness, and a whole lot of bad things happened. You know, there's very little alcoholism among Jewish people because they don't generally drink to get drunk. They have wine with their meal, and they don't go beyond there, generally speaking, and so their rate of alcoholism is very low. I, on the other hand, have Irish backgrounds. So, there used to be a sign in McGann's and Victor. It says, God invented whiskey to keep the Irish from taking over the world. And so, I have some background grandfather and great-grandfather who had problems. And sometimes Christians have problems, but they need to get control of it because wine is a mocker and strong drink a brawler. And whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. So we're talking about wisdom. We're talking about, living our life. It's not, some so-called holiness churches like the Assemblies of God or some groups like that, they will forbid people to drink any wine. And yeah, I guess that's okay if they want to do that. If you want to say to somebody, you can't join our church because you have a glass of wine with your meal, I think that's gone too far. But on the other hand, any kind of drunkenness is not a good thing. And here this guy is flat out drunk. And she's come back, she's given all this food to the army, which was not too far away. And she says, well, I better not tell him about this tonight. Some people are really belligerent drunks. And I suspect maybe this guy was. Some people, they get silly. My father didn't drink much at all, but if he did drink one drink of any kind, he would get silly. And I only saw him do that a couple of times. But he said to me that, his his father and grandfather and great-grandfather were all drinkers, and so when he worked at Kodak, he found himself one time just pulling into the bar on the way home, and then he said, well, I'm not going to drink anymore. But some people get really belligerent, and this guy's already belligerent to begin with. And so she doesn't want to talk to him about it. Here's a guy, it doesn't even look like the guy that I showed you at first, but here he is, basically almost passed out with beer bottles all around him. And has this guy ever been you? Have you experienced this kind of, I think I don't know, maybe not every kid, but a lot of young people, they do this one or two times before they wise up. And so she can't say anything to him that night, but then the next day, when he's hungover, in the morning when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became as a stone. I saved your life last night when you were in the drunken party, and the army was here, and they were on their way to kill you, and heart attack. Did you ever hear of a situation where bad news was given to somebody and they died? My grandfather, my father's father, was given bad news by his 18-year-old son, my father's brother, and he blew out an aneurysm and died on the spot. My uncle, my mother's sister's husband, her sister called her husband, who was in Albany, and said the son he's going to kill himself, and he's going to go out on Canisius Lake and drown himself. And my uncle died on the spot. He was 58. My grandfather was 65. He lived for 10 days. Nabal lived for 10 days, and then he died. So it turns out that David didn't have to fight him at all for any reason. His life was over. And Jesus talked about the rich man, did he not? Oh, my barns are full. What's the solution? Well, we got to do something. We got to build more barns. Thou fool, your life will be taken from you today. Then where will all your stuff go? So there's a lot of things to think about, and a lot of ways to be wise and not be foolish in this story. So we'll open it up now to anybody that wants to share something, say something, or if you want, if I need correction, go ahead and correct me. Right here, Matthew.
So you talked about how Nabal got his name Nabal, even though the root in that, let's say, language that says basically means fool. I think that biblical cultures, a lot of them, they have, let's say, they don't name the baby until they see their character, and then they add on the name, matching the character. So maybe we have a hint. No, like, why did they name it like a fool? But maybe later on, maybe they didn't have a name assigned by birth, but maybe the character will be speaking more than that.
If his parents did name him fool, would that be a good thing to do? Name your kid that? Well, I named my kid Caleb. Well, Nabal was a Calebite. Did you see that in the list? Go ahead, Caleb.
So, like you pointed out, we can see that he was intelligent in the sense that he knew how to run a business and make money. And in his own eyes, his decision was the wise decision, because we can read between the lines pretty well, like you said. He says, "Who is David?" And then he acknowledges that he knows he's Jesse's son. We know that he knows that he's a prince of Saul's house that is on the run in the way he talked. And so we can pretty much positively know he also knows that the last people, the village of priests that gave food to David, Saul came through and murdered them and their entire family for helping David.
That's a good point.
So I'm sure, even though it doesn't say that Nabal knew that. So in his head, he's thinking, hey, I've got all this money, I'm not going to help David, or Saul's going to come and kill me and all my family. But sometimes when you're wise, like he was able to see what could happen from one thing, but what he should have also looked at is, hey, what's going to happen to David if I piss him off? It's 2020 hindsight, but really what he should have done is he should have found a way to keep both sides happy and quietly help David without letting Saul know about it.
Not reading this in context, I didn't get that, but that is absolutely true. A very, very good point. He was trying to protect himself in one way. Who else?
So when Abigail went out to meet with David, I think she was showing wisdom in more ways than one, and I didn't hear this brought up. She made the idea that he was going to not seek vengeance. She made it sound like it was his idea instead of her telling him to not seek vengeance. I thought that was extremely wise of her. Because
instead of coming like this.
Yeah, he was already angry, right? He was angry. He was getting ready to go kill the whole population. And yet she came out and basically said to him, I know you're not going to do this because your God has already convinced you not. And, so I thought that was extremely wise of her. I can remember one time, one person that I worked with at Xerox, whenever he and I would have a disagreement, he would come to me and he would spend, and I kid you not, hours trying to convince me why I needed to change my mind and agree with him. And he got to a point after about 3 or 4 of these sessions that I finally would tell him, I don't agree with you, and please don't come and try to convince me why I need to change my mind, because at the end of it, I'm still not going to agree with you and have more reasons not to. But we do that as humans. If we think that logically, if we reach a conclusion, it's like your Facebook friend, if I reach a conclusion and I'm a smart person and I use logic, then anybody who doesn't agree with me didn't use logic, must not be smart. And we do that as humans all the time. It's hard for us to accept the fact that someone can have an opposite opinion and still have very good reasons, logical reasons why they have that opinion. We can't hardly buy that.
Another good point. Thanks, Gene. Anyone else? Palm Sunday, next Sunday. God bless you. Go in peace. Be wise.